What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Wayne's World. So, this is episode number 9, and today's date is August 11th, 2021. I'm going to try to get this video out as fast as possible. I'm still trying to figure the whole uploading videos out. Last one I put out took like 2 days to upload, but today being August 11th, tonight is the Perseids meteor shower, and of course, we get a thunderstorm going outside, but it's supposed to clear up here soon. If you get a chance to get out and check out the sky, please do. You'll thank me later. It's one of the most awesome spectacles nature gives us every year. So get outside, take your family, go check out the sky, get away from the ambient light. On some other topics. So I want to continue on with what I was talking about in my last video. I kind of gave out some information, some stuff to look at to kind of reaffirm what I'm saying, and I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information, and then if you go to my Facebook business page, on underneath this video, I'm going to put out an address, and that address will lead you to oh, it's a site called Patel Patriot, I think, and he describes what I'm talking about in great detail, provides proof, timelines, um, key pieces of information that'll help clear things up for you. So I'm going to skip over a lot of the stuff that I planned on talking about to keep this video a little shorter. So the big thing that's going on right now that we need to concern ourselves with is this thing called devolution. Now, when I first started hearing this word, probably a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, I didn't pay much attention to it. It confused me. I didn't understand what it was, and I'd like to consider myself a not stupid person. And but it was something I never heard of before, and I looked into it a little bit, still didn't understand it, so I kind of just left it alone. Well, the more I started hearing about it in like non mainstream sources, the more I was intrigued by it. So I started to look into it. And what devolution is it's basically a top secret continuity of government plan. And it's a real thing. It's not some speculation or conspiracy. It's a real thing that our government has in place to be used in times of emergency. And what it is the continuity of operational procedure and the succession of government is something that is known about, right? But there's also a secondary continuity of operational procedure and government succession that is secret, and it's held within each department, and it's not even known to Washington what that plan and what that succession is. And it's to be used during a time of catastrophic emergency or war. And I think that President Trump put this out there beginning of 2020 would be my best guess, and that's just a speculative guess right now. But so when the pandemic happened, obviously key figures know way more about this stuff than any of us do. They have all the classified intelligence. They get all the briefings from the best people in every field, military, medical, whatever. And I think that we knew right away that this was an attack that was put out there by China. And because it was an attack, it's an act of war. And because it's an act of war, it means that our president can react the way he sees fit. Now, to declare war, our president needs permission from the Senate and the House, Congress, basically. They have to approve it. But if we're attacked, then our president not only can he, but he has the duty to respond with the way that he sees best fit, suited for the situation. And when COVID came about, I really think that Trump put Fauci as the figurehead because Fauci was going to become a key figure now, and we were going to figure out that this dude was majorly responsible for what's going on with the whole pandemic. Not only was he the head of the infectious disease side of our government, I can't remember the word for it right now, but he helped fund the Wuhan laboratory, and he was doing and helping fund gain of function research in this Wuhan laboratory where they were making viruses seriously deadly to humans. And so that came out, and this is the biggest attack that's ever happened in the history of the United States. This is bigger than Pearl Harbor. This is bigger than 9/11. And the news media wants you to think it was an accident. It came from a bat. We now know that's not true. We got Fauci's emails to know that he was involved not only in the creation of it, but in the cover up of it. And he's kind of been a little less public since his emails started coming out. And so, one of the government entities that is tasked with dealing with situations like this is our Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, you hear a lot about the CIA on the news, and I'm sure you have a basic idea, if not a full idea, of what they do. You hear about the FBI, you know what they do. Basically, the FBI is for stuff that happens within our country and is domestic, and the CIA is for foreign intelligence and foreign situations, and they're supposedly not allowed to act on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens. Is that true? I mean, is that what the rules they follow? I highly doubt it, but that's their prerogative. Now, the DIA is very similar to the CIA, but their mission is to provide intelligence that's directly related to combat operations. So, not just intelligence, not just foreign intelligence, but intelligence that's directly related to combat operations. Now, in February of 2021, our DIA, they got a hold of the highest level defector that we have ever seen, we've ever had in our, I say custody, but the guy's not, I don't think in custody. I just think he's under our protective cloak. And when the DIA got him, they didn't let anybody know. They didn't tell the presidential administration, they didn't tell the CIA, they didn't tell the FBI, they didn't tell anybody. So this guy, and his name, I'm probably going to butcher this, is Dong Jingwei. He is the vice minister for China's Ministry of State Security. So from what I gather, he's basically like their Secretary of Defense or something high level position like that. And he, very high up individual, has a lot of information, knows a lot about what's going on in that country. And he defected to the U.S. and nobody knew about it. And when he defected, he brought over terabytes of information with him. And there's a lot of damning information in these terabytes of information. And when it started to get out that we had him, months later, a month after the fact, so we had this guy for a month when it started to get out in public channels that we had him. And Biden was asked about it, and so was the CCP, and they both denied that he was in our control. And so the CCP, to prove that we didn't have him, they put out a picture of this dude at an international conference. Now this picture from this international conference where he was supposedly at, India says not only was Dong Jingwei not there, there was no representation for China at this conference whatsoever. So the picture is probably a real picture. It was just probably from a different conference at an earlier time. Now, this Dong Jingwei, he brought forth a bunch of information, and it's information that has a lot to do with not only the pandemic, but who is spying for China in our country, not only as Chinese citizens, but as American citizens and American governmental officials. And I'm going to read you some of the stuff that he supposedly, and like I said, I don't have this stuff in my hands, so I can't prove it, but I believe this is something that has happened. And so this dude brought forth early pathogenic studies of the virus we know as SARS-CoV-2, or the Chinese virus, or COVID, or whatever you want to call it. So early studies way before the release of the pandemic. Models that predicted the spread of the China virus and the damage that it would do to the U.S. and the world. So how much damage would it do to our country and the rest of the world? Financial records detailing who funded the research and the labs where this virus was created, and other biological warfare research, so chemical weapons that China is producing. Now, that was all the stuff related to COVID. Now, he also brought with him information pertaining to who's spying for China in our country. And that list is names of U.S. citizens who provide intel to China. So American citizens that are backdooring information illegally, treasonously to China. Names of Chinese spies working in the U.S. or attending U.S. universities. And there's thought to be, I want to say it's like 375,000 Chinese citizens attending United States universities or institutions. And this guy says roughly 1/3 of those students are working on behalf of China as spies. And a lot of that 1/3, so it's about, was that 125,000 roughly? A lot of that 1/3 is they're here under false names, so pseudonyms, and they're children of high level Chinese officials and military uh, members. So the kids of our biggest enemies in the world are here in our universities spying on behalf of China. Um, Details of meetings with U.S. government officials and with Chinese spies and members of the Russia spy network, so the Russian SVR. So who in our government has had meetings with them? Sometimes unknowingly, but it has information of what took place during those meetings and who was in those meetings. Um, Financial records showing U.S. businessmen and public officials who have received money from the Chinese government. So our politicians and our business owners that have received money from China. And then how the Chinese government gained, this one's dark. How the Chinese government gained access to a CIA communication system that led to the death of dozens of Chinese people working on behalf of the United States for the CIA in China. So Chinese citizens that were spying for us, that list of their names got put out by somebody. My guess is Hillary, and that was the whole thing with her unsecure information, servers, emails, phones, whatever. I think she's the one that got that out there. They got those Chinese people killed. And then last but not least, it details Joe and Hunter's business dealings with Chinese entities. And there's probably a whole lot more on there. I mean, terabytes of information is a lot of information. That's just a small list, but I'm sure it's a lot of damning information that proves that China has conducted acts of war against the United States. And when China conducts those acts of war, our president has to see fit. And I think devolution was his plan to put us back on the right track. Because if we keep going on the track that we're on now, say goodbye to the United States of America as you know it. I mean, look at how things are going so fast. COVID hit, we started to bounce back. The fraudulent election happened, and now gas prices have tripled, food prices have skyrocketed, lumber prices have gone up 1,000%, metal prices have skyrocketed. We are no longer energy independent. I mean, all these things that were great for the United States are gone. Our border is wide open. We're letting tons of people in here from who knows where with who knows what disease, illness, human trafficking, the whole 9 yards is happening at the border. It's a pandemonium down there, and we're just letting it all happen. And it's the Biden administration. And whether you voted for the guy or not, you got to be able to see the writing on the wall. It's in everything that we do these days. And I've never been into politics. I don't like to push it. I stay away from it as far as my business is concerned. But I think we're at a point where we can no longer afford to keep our mouths shut. So we need to wake people up because there's still a lot of sleeping people out there. So that's the stuff about that Dong Jing Wei. Now, I think that after that happened, one of the things that our president put into place during this devolution was that he put forth a Presidential Executive Action Document, also known as a PEAD, a PEAD, that suspended the Electoral College vote. So I'm kind of summarizing here, but back when Reagan was president, we had some stuff going on that he put forth a PEAD, and it didn't get enacted, but he put forth one of these presidential action documents that called for the suspension of the Constitution under certain situations. Never had to use it, but instead of just suspending the Constitution, I think our president decided to suspend the Electoral College vote because he knew, and high level intelligence officials knew that it was infiltrated and there was a lot of fraudulent activity going on. So the virus and the pandemic are seriously connected. And I think the pandemic was created not only to crush our economy, which was ultimately helped built by President Trump and his the way he conducted business with other entities around the world, and the way he oh killed a lot of bad regulation that tied our hands, and so it killed his economy, and also made it to where mail-in voting was a normal thing. And Democrats, Republicans, no matter who you want to listen to, since the beginning of time, they have all said the easiest way to fraud the election is through mail-in voting, and we've known this for a long time. And it was not only normal during this last election, but it was out of control. I mean, we had what, semi loads of ballots pulling into the election voting centers at 3 o'clock in the morning on November 4th. I mean, you got to think something's fishy about that. And at the same time, the officials are covering up the windows and not letting people see what they're doing, which is totally against the law. And they all just got away with it. And I think there's a plan in place that, because if we just shut all that down and won the election, what would happen next election? What would happen the election after that? So we wouldn't fix the problem. Like, we didn't fix the problem in 2016. We sidestepped the problem. And sidestepping a problem and fixing a problem are two different things. So now we have to fix the problem. We have to find out who these nefarious actors in our country are, who is attacking us, and who is purposely damaging our country and our way of life. And I think that's what this whole devolution entails, because I think that we have all the information, we have all the proof, and I think they're just waiting for the right time to release everything. And there's a lot of stuff that's coinciding right now, like the Arizona vote count, where they're going through everything with a fine tooth comb on camera. Every single square centimeter of that vote count facility was on camera. Everybody was on camera. Every ballot was on camera. Everything everybody did was on real-time camera, so everybody could watch it and keep an eye on it, so they couldn't come back and say, oh, you did this or you did that illegally. So when that comes out, I think that's going to be kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, that opens mass eyes, and lets us put this devolution plan in place. And so part of what goes into this is us being able to enact this devolution plan is our critical infrastructure protection plans. And our National Infrastructure Protection Plan, the NIPP, it's a designated plan that's put in place to protect our critical infrastructure. Now, one of those pieces of critical infrastructure is our elections. Elections are considered critical infrastructure. And what this NIPP does is it implements advisory councils, which involves private sectors in matters of national security as it relates to that specific piece of infrastructure. And when it comes to elections, they have their own advisory council, and it is made up of business entities that have dealings in the elections. And the people that are on these councils, they are considered special government employees. And as special government employees, they are exempt. Now, remember this, they are exempt from oversight in public law. Now, this election entity is known as the Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Council. Write that down if you have to, or EISCC, which I'll refer to it from here on out. So the EISCC advises and assists the government on election-related infrastructure such as physical security, cybersecurity, and energy or emergency preparedness. The EISCC is made up of a bunch of different entities, which, let me find my list here, and this is going to blow your mind. So this is the private sector people that are considered special government employees that are responsible for the oversight and handling of election infrastructure. Now, on this list is I'd say about 15 different member organizations. And on this list is Dominion Voting, Smartmatic, Scytl, or however you say that, Scytl, I've heard that one before, But the two big ones that will ring a bell in everyone's head is Dominion and Smartmatic. So Dominion and Smartmatic are on this EISCC, or Election Infrastructure Subsector Coordinating Council, and their job is to oversee the process and the security of elections. So they're the ones that if there was a security breach, they would have to bring it forward. Now, this is a gigantic conflict of interest because that's like the mafia investigating itself. Because so Dominion and Smartmatic are some of the ones that are supposed to investigate and put forth information if the vote wasn't secure. Now, you'll remember that right after the election, a government entity came out and said, this is the most secure election of all time. Guess who that government entity, or that entity that came up with those findings was? It was the EISCC. So it was Dominion and Smartmatic saying that there was no problem with what Dominion and Smartmatic did. So we need to be weary of that. Come on, folks. If this doesn't ring a bell and open your eyes, I don't know what does. So that's dealing with the infrastructure. Look into that. Now, let's see here. We know that Dominion has some serious foreign ties. Staple Street Capital purchased Dominion in 2018. A company called UBS Securities LLC arranged the transaction. 3 out of 4 board members of UBS Securities LLC are Chinese citizens. So there's some serious Chinese ties there. And China paid Dominion's parent company, or $400 million sometime previous to the election. Now, why would they pay them $400 million? So that they could gain access to what we were trying to do in November? Pretty sure that's what it is. Now, the last thing I want to cover here before I kind of sign off and send you on your way to look at this for yourself is a lot of violence has come along in our streets, in our cities, in our country since the pandemic and the election thing has happened. And I think most of us can see that these violent actors, Antifa and BLM, are in coordination with certain government officials and the media. Because for the longest time, the media was telling us, oh, there's no riots. It's a bunch of peaceful protests. Meanwhile, we're seeing cities burning on YouTube and Facebook, and we're seeing people attacked and killed in the streets on YouTube and Facebook. But the news organization is saying, oh, no big deal. And simultaneously, if these people are getting arrested, we have our own government officials putting together funds to not only bail them out, but the judges are just setting aside charges so they don't get in trouble. Oh, you were arrested for burning down someone's business. Cops caught you. You go to jail. Judge lets you out. No charges filed. It doesn't make any sense to me. And they were lying to us the whole time. Well, Antifa, they say it's more of an idea than an organization. And with it being an idea instead of an organization with no figurehead at the top and no supposed tracks to where the money comes from and who is leading this organization, it's more of a domestic threat. And with it being just a domestically located, domestically ran threat, then there's certain entities of ours, such as the military, that can't get involved. Well, I don't know if you remember, but back on, I have the date here somewhere. Back on, let's flip through my stuff here. June 1st of last year, while all the riots were going on, Washington, D.C. was burning, right after, a couple days after the death of George Floyd, President Trump did like this surprise, unplanned little visit to St. John's Church, which is across the road from the White House. Well, when he did this and his security cleared that spot of the street and he walked across and held the Bible up and whatever, we knew that Antifa was in the area, and we knew that would kind of catch their interest, that was going on, and what do we do at this period of time? So simultaneously while Trump was doing that, we were putting these spy birds up in the air. And these birds, they basically cast a 20-mile net that picks up all communications within that 20 miles. And I watch this guy on YouTube pretty regularly. His channel is called Monkey Works Overwatch, and he's a pretty serious, very intelligent individual who just watches the skies, and he knows uh, plane designations, the names and the numbers behind the planes, and you can constantly see these spy birds flying over areas, and he knows which ones they are, and they fly over DC all the time. And like during the Arizona vote count, they were flying over Arizona, and they're over other parts of the country regular. But he knows what planes they are. Now, how Trump's little visit to the church and these planes coincide is when Antifa started making their phone calls. Whoever they were calling and whatever they were saying was being sucked up by this system in the sky that basically cast that 20-mile wide net. So I think it was there that we figured out that there's foreign entities involved, i.e., George Soros, whoever else, paying for these people and instructing these people to do what it is that they're doing, which that now makes it to where our military can get involved in taking care of the problem because it is no longer a domestic threat. It is a foreign terrorist threat. And being a foreign terrorist threat, it means that we can sic the military on them, and we can also... Oh, hang on a second here. We can also use the National Counterterrorism Center to deal with it. And this was created to handle extremist groups, but it's for foreign threats only. But now that we know that Antifa has foreign ties, we can use the military and the NCTC to deal with it. And if you look at those changes that Trump made right after the election, where Christopher Miller was put in charge of this, or put in place as Secretary of Defense, and Ezra Cohen Watnick and Kash Patel and a few others that are known patriots, known in the special operations community for being pretty versed in what they do in their own realm. He was in charge of the National Counterterrorism Center. And so now Christopher Miller's involved in this, and this is this dude's expertise. It's what he's done his whole life. And I think we figured out the lines of communication, where the money's coming from, and who the heads are of Antifa. So that just further proves the idea that we're at war. We've been attacked in a couple different fashions by China, one through the election process and one through the virus. And these are serious acts of war against the U.S., which, kind of proves that Trump can use this devolution. And then I think one of the things that a lot of people are mistaken about what happened is the whole January 6th thing. So now that we know that our military can get involved in the planning, oversight, and attack on these organizations such as Antifa, we can kind of put together the pieces of what happened on January 6th. So follow along with me here. And I might get a little bit off track, but on January 6th, President Trump said that he was going to come out and give a speech. Now, it was plastered everywhere that President Trump was going to come and give that speech, and it was supposed to start at 11 o'clock on January 6th, so 11 a.m. on January 6th. And Trump's not a guy who's late, right? He's a businessman. He prides himself on certain things, and one of those things is being timely. Well, he was over an hour late, and I think that was on purpose. And I think they widely disseminated the fact that his speech was supposed to start at 11 on purpose so that Antifa could come in and plan their little escapade dressed as Trump supporters. So he was over an hour late, and so he didn't get there till noon, and his speech lasted for 1 hour and 12 minutes. So he got there at noon, speech lasted for 1 hour and 12 minutes. That means his speech got over at roughly 1:12 p.m. Now, where he was speaking at was over 1.5 miles away from the Capitol Rotunda. And we have confirmed proof that the Capitol barricades were breached at 1:05 p.m. So the math doesn't add up, right? So Trump's speech went till 1:12 p.m. It was over a mile and a half away from the Capitol Rotunda, and the the breach happened at 1:05 p.m. So it happened 7 minutes before his speech ended, a mile and a half away from where it was at. Does that do you think that those same people that were at the speech went down there and attacked the Capitol? No, and we have so much proof of them opening the doors, them opening the gates. I know people that were there personally that said they did nothing. They just walked up there, then they got hit with pepper. They didn't even go inside. They got hit with tear gas and rubber bullets just for being where they were told they were allowed to be. We got video and pictures of the Capitol Police shaking hands, high-fiving, fist bumping with the people that were coming in. We got video evidence of these people staying inside the velvet ropes, not causing any destruction. And then we have evidence and proof that there was bad actors there dressed as Trump supporters. Now, I fully think that there's so much connections here, it's hard for me to explain. But the kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer, remember that thing that supposedly almost took place? Well, we've now come to find out that almost all of the people involved in that were undercover FBI. So almost every one of them was undercover FBI. And I think that was a small scale practice run for what was going to happen on January 6th. And on January 6th, though, I think that we have all the information that we need. And we have all the pictures. Like, why aren't they releasing all the video footage from what happened inside the Capitol? There's so many video cameras in there. Why isn't it being released? You know? And let me see where I'm at here. Now, here's another piece of information that hasn't been put out there to the public. So, on January 5th, so the day before the so-called insurrection at the Capitol, Trump released a memo to Congress. And in this memo, he talks about how Antifa has long used otherwise permissible demonstrations to engage in lawless criminal behavior to further its radical agenda. So on January 5th, Trump sent a memo to Congress saying that Antifa basically infiltrates peaceful protests to enhance their radical agenda. And these infiltrations and violent acts undermine the rights of peaceful protesters, because under our Constitution, we are allowed to peacefully assemble and peacefully protest. And that's what I think the very, very, very vast majority of people there that day were there to do. And these infiltrators, these Antifa members, these criminals were there causing problems on purpose because they wanted to make it out like Trump caused this insurrection and he's an evil person trying to cause a coup and take back the White House. And if that was the case, there was millions and millions of people there that day. It was purposely the biggest gathering of Trump supporters ever. And it was broadcast everywhere. And we knew that Antifa was going to infiltrate it, because that's what they do. They infiltrate all these peaceful protests. Whether it's the right side doing it or the left side doing it, they infiltrate all of them and make all of us look bad. And we already had surveillance in the sky. We've had surveillance in the sky since Trump walked across the street to St. John's Church. We've been listening to these people talk. We've known what they were doing, and we've captured their communications. So we knew it was coming. And we know there was undercover FBI involved there too. You know, and the people did no violence, almost no violence. And the only person that was killed by another person was Ashley Babbitt. And 2 days later, they're calling for her cremation. 2 days after she was shot, an unarmed female who was not attacking anybody, who was not hitting anybody, hurting anybody, didn't have a weapon in her hands, was shot by Capitol Police. And 2 days later, I don't know if it was 2 days later she got cremated or 2 days later the government was calling for her cremation. And it was caused by probably a law enforcement officer who was high on adrenaline, scared to death and shaking, And I mean, if that's the truth of that whole situation, but they wanted her cremated right afterwards, that doesn't make any sense. And just lots of things here that absolutely boggle the mind, right? And this is the stuff that we have to look into and think about. And I urge you, I'm gonna go to my, if you're just on my YouTube, go to my Facebook, and I'm going to put a link to this thing called Patel Patriots Devolution Series. And so far, there's 8 um, little articles to read, and they're like 4 or 5 pages a piece. But it lays this out in pretty clear detail. It's hard to follow because there's so many, you know, paths and webs and layers to it. But if you take your time and reread it, um, I think you'll begin to understand what I'm talking about. And we ultimately need to find out who's behind this, who's behind the pandemic, who's behind the election fraud, who's behind Antifa's involvement on January 6th. Who in the Democratic Party um, knew what was happening, who paid for it. We need to know all this stuff. And there's a lot of ties between the CCP, certain factions of our government and government officials, certain politicians, Antifa, BLM. I think BLM is a thing of their own. They're obviously a Marxist movement. I don't think that the words that BLM stand for are wrong. I think that their organization is wrong because it doesn't stand for what their name is. If you catch what I'm saying there, but you know, go to that site, read what I'm telling you to read, and it's something seriously eye opening. Until next time, have a good day, folks.